In this lesson, we'll gain a deeper understanding of the keyword self. On the screen, I've got an object that when pressed, it will start tweening in and out as if it's bouncing. And when pressed again, it'll stop tweening. We've seen this before, except it didn't have any interactivity. So we'll look at how to create this using the keyword self. The first thing that we'll do is add a touch event listener to the foo object. Then we'll create the touch method on the foo object. Then within, we'll create the conditional logic necessary to handle the touch event. The first thing that we'll listen for is e.phase, and we'll listen for its began phase. And within the began phase, we'll want to set the focus of the touch, and as well create the custom property hasFocus on the foo object. Now here, we'll pass in self, and we'll pass in self because it refers to foo. And the reason that we can use self is because our method is defined using the colon. When you define a method using the colon, it allows you to use the self keyword to refer to the object that has the method. If you've worked with JavaScript or Java, this is the same as using the keyword this. Now we'll create a property on the foo object called hasFocus and set that equal to true. Now we'll create an additional conditional branch and we'll test for the hasFocus property of the foo object. And if it does have focus, then within this branch, we'll create a new conditional branch. If e.phase is in the ended phase or the canceled phase. And what we'll want to do here is release the focus and set the focus to false. Release focus by passing nil, then set this to false. So far, the code really doesn't do anything except assign focus on the beginning of the touch and release it on the end. Now we'll use a runtime event listener to tween the object. And we'll use enter frame. We'll have the foo object listen for this event. Now we'll create the method to handle the enter frame event. And because we're listening to the enter frame event on an object, we can use the colon, and we can listen for the object using the same method name as the event. So we'll jump ahead, and we're going to listen for a tweening property of the foo object, which we've yet to create. So if self.tweening, that means it's animating, but it's false, so actually that means it's not animating. Then we'll want to call a method called tween, which now we'll create. So before the foo touch function, we'll create function foo tween with no argument. And before we start defining this, we need some local variables. Local I is 0, a forward reference for a variable called n, and then a cached copy of the value of pi. And this will give us a performance tweak. Within the tween function, we'll set I equal to I plus 1, so we're incrementing it. We'll set n equal to I divided by 360, and that result times 2 times pi. Then we'll set n equal to itself passed through math.cos, which is cosine. Finally, we'll use the self keyword to get the x property of the foo object. We'll set that equal to self.x, the current value of x, plus n. And this will create fluid motion on the x-axis. Then we'll affect the rotation property of the foo object and the x-scale and y-scale properties. And we're tying everything to n. Now, within the ended phase, and just before we release the focus, we'll create some conditional logic to test for self.tweening. So if self.tweening exists, if it's true, then we'll want to set it to false. So we're creating a switch. Else if self.tweening equals false, then we'll want to set it to true. Else if not self.tweening, it doesn't exist, then we'll want to make it exist. And this is a good contingency. And that's actually if it doesn't exist or if it's nil. Okay, now we'll go up to the declaration of foo and type foo.tweening, because remember, self has been referring to foo. We'll set it equal to nil. And this is a custom property that's going to track the animation state of the object. Okay, now we'll load it in the simulator and tap it, and it starts animating. When we tap it again, tweening is equal to false, so it stops the animation. Tap it again, it's equal to true. So really we've created a switch. The reason that we use the self keyword is so that we don't create extra references to our objects. When we do create extra references, we run the risk of having memory leaks or of creating code that's heavy and doesn't perform as efficiently. Note that if you try to define a function like so, function foo.tween, you cannot use the self keyword here. This ends our lesson on understanding the self keyword.